ברוכות הבאות, ladies. ברוכות הנמצאות. We have a lot of work to do today, and we want to welcome, first of all, the viewers, those who are tuning in, whether it's to Torah Anytime or to ohelsarah.com. We really appreciate your devotion and your attitude towards Torah, that you log on, some of you every single day, to listen to shiurim, especially now this week before the Chag. Thank you so much for tuning in. This week, ladies, Motzei Shabbat, we're going to celebrate Chag Shavuot, whose message I think we internalize the least. Why do I say this? Because when Rosh Hashanah rolls around on the calendar, we spend 2 days eating specific foods, we blow the shofar, and we spend time davening in shul. Yom Kippur is a day where we fast all day and pray. Sukkot is the holiday where for 8 days we sit in the sukkah connecting to Hashem and understanding our belief. On Chanukah we light the menorah, and for 8 days we celebrate the miracle that happened to our ancestors during the Greek era. On Purim we have 24 hours of joyful celebrations with excitement, feasts and dancing. On Pesach, we gather around the Seder table to discuss and celebrate the freedom from slavery in Egypt. But somehow, when Shavuot appears on the calendar, our conversations leading up to that day is pretty much about what kind of cheesecakes we're going to make, or what kind of original dairy dish we're going to be serving. That's the reality. Sadly, before Shavuot, and even on Shavuot, there's very little talk about what the message of this Chag is really all about. So, if everybody ventured out to a Shiur Torah or tuned in just days before this auspicious Chag, it's my obligation to teach you something profound about Shavuot that you could hopefully internalize and share with those around you. I'll begin by telling you a story about a rabbi who you may not be as familiar with as the Rabbanim in the Mishnah, like Hillel HaZaken alav shalom, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi alav shalom, or Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes alav shalom. But this rabbi is often quoted in the Mishnah, and his life is interesting and even to some degree controversial. His name was Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkenos alav shalom. Whenever the Mishnah says Rabbi Eliezer, it's referring to Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkenos. And you must have heard this name before. We read Pirkei Avot every week after Pesach. You've heard that name just like you heard the name Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Eliezer lived a short time after the destruction of the second Bet HaMikdash. When he was 22 years old, he was totally ignorant concerning Torah matters, very much like Rabbi Akiva. The difference was that Rabbi Akiva had an extremely poor upbringing, and only later on he married into a wealthy family, the family of Kalba Savua. Rabbi Eliezer, however, came from a very wealthy family. His father was extremely rich, and his father's plan was to take all his real estate and divide it amongst his sons. Each of them received a portion of land, property, to work on. So Rabbi Eliezer inherited property, a land to work, to cultivate, to build on. And every few days, his father came to survey the land, to monitor the achievements, and help if need be. And he did this with each of his sons. One day, Horkenos came to visit his son Eliezer's land, and he found him sitting in the field crying. So he said, Eliezer, what's wrong? Are you crying because the land that I gave you is filled with rocks and you're having a difficult time cultivating it? Don't worry, I'll give you a different property. Horkenos then transferred Eliezer to a new field where the land was soft and easy to cultivate and plow. Sometime later, he came back and found Eliezer once again sitting in the field and crying. And he says, "What's wrong now? Why are you crying?" And Eliezer told his father, "Abba, I'll tell you the truth. I want to be able to go and study Torah." His father couldn't believe what he was hearing. And he says, "Listen, you're way too old to start studying Torah. You're 22. Who starts learning Torah at age 22? Rather get married, have kids, and send them to the yeshivot to study Torah." But Eliezer says, "No, Abba, this is what I want. I want to study Torah." Cohen saw that his son was serious about this. So what did he do? He moved him to a new field on top of a mountain somewhere, hoping Eliezer will do away with these crazy thoughts. And of course, after Eliezer moved to this top of this mountain, he once again began to cry hysterically. This time, HaKadosh Baruch Hu dispatched Eliyahu Hanavi Zachur Latov, who met up with Eliezer and asked him, "Why are you crying?" And he said, "I really just want to study Torah." So Eliyahu Hanavi said, "If you want to learn that badly, why don't you run away to Yerushalayim and study there with Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai?" And that's what Rabbi Eliezer did. He ran away from home, ran away from all his fields, the soft one, the rocky one, the one that was on top of the mountain, and he went to study Torah. Rabbi Yochanan, who was elder of Yerushalayim, he was one of the leaders at that time. Rabbi Yochanan saw this 22-year-old young man, and he asked him, he says, "Young man, do you know how to pray? Do you know the brachot? Do you know how to recite Kriyat Shema?" And Rabbi Eliezer said, "Rabbi, I'll tell you the truth. I don't know anything. I don't know Aleph." And with such a graciousness and kindness, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, alav shalom, the great rabbi and leader of his time, began to teach this young man the basics in Judaism. Rabbi Eliezer, because he was so poor, had no money at this point, went for days without eating an ounce of good food. Some Chachamim say he used to eat the soil from the ground. He ate just enough to survive, and that's it. So one day, the rabbi asked him, "Eliezer, I want to know, tell me, who are you really?" And Eliezer said to him, I can't say, I'd rather not say." And the Rav said, "Please, I have to know who you really are." And he says, "Okay, I'll tell you. I am the son of Horkenos." And the rabbi shocked. "You're the son of the world famous wealthy man Horkenos? Are you serious?" When Eliezer says, "Yes, he's my father," the Rav was bewildered. And he said, "If you're the son of Horkenos, what are you doing here?" And Eliezer says, "I really wanted to study Torah, to learn and to understand. So I ran away from home, from all my obligations." So the Rav said, "Well, that's very admirable of you, but if you have no money right now, and you've pretty much deserted the family, how are you supporting yourself? How are you living? Have you eaten anything?" And Eliezer was a little embarrassed, but eventually he tells the rabbi, "No, Kvod Harav, I barely eat." Rabbi Yochanan felt so badly. He brought him into his own home. He fed him, and he taught him Torah. And he continued to feed him and to teach him Torah until Eliezer eventually became a tremendous and unbelievably wise rabbi. He earned the title of Rabbi Eliezer. He became a Tana. It's not a pashut item to be a Tana. Anyway, in the meantime, Rabbi Eliezer's brothers back home were feeling a little in a complaining mode, and they approached their father and they said, "Abba, Our brother Eliezer ran away from home. He ran away from his fields and he ran away from his obligations. You know what? It's not right. It's not respectful. It's not fair. We think you should write him off from your will and he should get 0 because he doesn't deserve it. And Hyrcanus said, my dear sons, you know what? You have a point, and I like the idea. So Hyrcanus got up and he traveled to Yerushalayim in order to seek out his son. When he arrived, it just so happened to be that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was hosting a banquet for all the wealthiest men of the time, like Ben Kalba Savua, like Naktivon ben Gurion. The wealthiest men of that time that remained after the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash were at this banquet. So of course, Hyrcanus joined the banquet, and all the rabbis made a special place for the rabbi, for the father of the rabbi, Rabbi Eliezer, at the dais. And then Rabbi Yochanan turned to this young man, Rabbi Eliezer, and he says, please stand up and address the audience and say a few words of Torah. Rabbi Eliezer couldn't believe it. Me? I should address such a prestigious and honorable, mechubad crowd? But Rabbi Yochanan insisted. So Rabbi Eliezer got up and proceeded to astound the Rabbanim with his words of wisdom. And when he finished his speech, a rabbi walked over to him, kissed him on the head and said, how lucky are Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov that this young man descended from them. Hyrcanus was watching all of this, and he turned to this rabbi and he said, how lucky are Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov? How lucky am I? This is my son. It's then that Hyrcanus stood up and he made the following announcement. He said, I came here to write my son off from his inheritance. I came here to swear that he'll have nothing, none of my wealth, nothing of my inheritance, and nothing of my future. But after I saw with my own eyes what this boy became, I decided to do the opposite. Eliezer is going to receive everything, and my other sons will get nothing. Rabbi Eliezer was shocked. And he said, but that's not what I asked for. I just wanted to study Torah. I don't need the money. And Hyrcanus says, doesn't matter. That's the deal. Chachamim tell us that Rabbi Eliezer didn't go for this. And of course, he shared the wealth. And he gave his brothers a lot of the inheritance. But the point is, that's how Rabbi Eliezer became a great Talmid Chacham and a great Tana. Ladies, when I read this story, I don't just see Rabbi Eliezer or his father Hyrcanus. I see so many boys in various communities and their parents. There are so many parents who say, I would love for my son to study Torah, but there's a limit. There's a limit. I mean, I don't really want him to get into it too much. Torah is nice, but that's not what we want for our son, at least not full time. There are boys who go to study Torah and they proceed to a kollel, and their parents tell the rabbi, listen, Rabbi, do we want this for him? I mean, if my son would become like Rav Ovadia Yosef, like Rav Chaim Kanievsky, like Rav Elyashiv, we wouldn't mind. It would be good actually. It would actually be very good. But he's not going to become like any of those rabbis. We know it. You know he's not going to become that great. So why are you allowing him to keep learning like this? Please, don't let him keep learning. Now, ladies, I'm not saying that you should all ship your sons off to the kollel. Although I do believe that every young man should spend his days in the kollel at least for 3 years after marriage, because it helps to build a foundation of Torah in the home. When a man already starts off his marriage in the kollel, learning in the Bet Midrash. But the point is that I just want you to be aware that there are too many parents who don't appreciate Torah, the learning of Torah, or value Torah nearly enough. Not enough people are willing to make sacrifices for the Torah. Do you know that the average family that pays full tuition pays close to $250,000 throughout the lifetime of one child? Take one boy from pre-1A through 12th grade, $250,000. In order for our children to learn Torah, we spend a lot of money, otherwise they would be learning in a public school, chaz v'shalom. Now that's a big monetary sacrifice we make. But guess what? A lot of those boys, after they graduate 12th grade, many parents barely spend any money on furthering their son's Torah education, even though they just spent $250,000 on one boy. But once that one boy is done with high school, many parents turn their focus to his career. It's all about the career. And you should know that there's nothing wrong with a young man having a career. And I do think, by the way, that every young man out there should attain some kind of degree or occupation that he should have under his belt for the future. It's very critical that some boys out there have a healthy career or at least some kind of trade, even if they're going to continue in the world of Torah. So I'm not telling you to send your sons off to the kollel, especially, by the way, if your sons are not able to sit and learn all day long. What I'm saying is that there should be more of an emphasis in the home concerning the importance of Torah. Furthering the study of Torah is so important for your sons because they're going to be fathers and husbands one day. They're going to be the mashpi'im in their own homes, the spiritual mentors. And if they have very little to contribute as a mashpi'a ruchani, then what's the point of getting married and raising children? How many fathers do I know that when they come home Friday night and a little kid says, Abba, what's this week's parasha? They turn to the wife and say, tell them what the parasha is. Ladies, come on. There's so many young men who barely attend a shiur during the week because they're so occupied with work. Now I want to tell you something. In some communities, there are about 2,000 men who study Torah every single week. And by the way, that's a very generous number, 2,000. A good 1,000 of them are young single boys, because when the boys are young, they're still full of energy. Now, some of you might be thinking, wow, 1,000 to 2,000 men, males, who attend the shiur once a week, that's pretty good. Sure, it's good. It's amazing. And I commend all those men and boys for going to learn Torah at least once a week. But I'm going to shock you now. Do you know that 2,000, that's not even 10% of that community? Imagine that. That's sad. The Gemara of Berachot says, Nashim, b'mai zachyan. What is the merit that women earn? This Gemara is telling us that there's a critical merit that women earn and have earned. Listen to the words of the Gemara. שהיו מחכות לגברים שיחזרו מבית המדרש. The merit the women earned during the times of the Gemara is that they waited longingly for their husbands to come home from the Bet Midrash. ומושיבות את התינוקות בבית כנסת. And they would make sure the little ones attended shul. You hear this? These women encouraged Torah, supported Torah, motivated the men in their households to be involved in matters of Torah. Ladies, your zechut is earned when you see to it that Torah is flourishing in your homes. You have a tremendous zechut just because you pick up your children from yeshiva, and just because you wait for your husbands to come home after learning Torah, after a shiur. But sadly, there aren't enough women waiting at night for their husbands to come home from learning. Sadly, there aren't enough women who invest in the Torah learning of their sons or in their spiritual future. Rabbi friend, Yisachar friend, Shalita once said something in one of his shiurim that I want to share with you because it falls in line with what we're talking about today. He asked, what was Moshe Rabbeinu's greatest achievement in life? Some people say it's the splitting of the sea. That's a great achievement. Some people say it's the fact that he led Bnei Israel out of Egypt. Some would say, maybe it's the highlight of his life was receiving the Torah on Har Sinai, going up to the Shamayim, bringing it back down. But Rabbi Fred said that although all those moments in Moshe Rabbeinu's life were amazing and monumental, but still, there is one event that could very well have been greater than all those other moments. That moment was when after 40 days and 40 nights of being in the Shamayim, he came back down and he saw the Jewish people worshiping the golden calf. What did he do? He took the holy luchot, the holy tablets, and he threw them down to the ground. He shattered them. That moment may just have been Moshe Rabbeinu's greatest moment. The Gemara tells us very clearly that Moshe Rabbeinu, after he broke the luchot, HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him, Ishar kochacha sheshibarta. Well done, Moshe. Thank you for breaking the luchot. He gets a check. But what's the proof that this was indeed Moshe Rabbeinu's greatest moment? Because if you look at the last few words in the entire Torah, which is in Sefer Devarim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says that there will be no one else in the history of mankind that will ever rise to the likes of Moshe Rabbeinu. Nobody. No one will perform the miracles the way he did. No one will have the miraculous and powerful hand, Le'enei kol Yisrael, of which the eyes of the Jewish people witnessed it. These last three words in the Torah, Le'enei kol Yisrael, are very significant. And Rashi HaKadosh Alav Shalom comments on those words, and he says, what did Moshe Rabbeinu do, Le'enei kol Yisrael, before the eyes of the Jewish people? What did he do? He took the luchot and he shattered them with all the Jewish people as his witness. Rashi HaKadosh explains that all the miracles that Moshe Rabbeinu was involved in, like Yetziat Mitzrayim, like the splitting of the sea, like Matan Torah, all those moments, they are amazing. But those words that the Torah HaKadosha concludes with, Le'enei kol Yisrael, that seems to be the pinnacle of what makes Moshe Rabbeinu a great and unique man. And that was when he came down from Shamayim and broke the luchot. And I ask, why was that moment so special? Why does it make Moshe Rabbeinu unique if he broke the luchot? And the answer, ladies, is incredible. You see, Moshe Rabbeinu knew that these luchot were the climax of everything that transpired up until that moment. He spent years preparing to become a man that would be worthy enough to lead the Jewish people. When he met Hashem at the burning bush, HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him, I'm going to take the Jewish nation out of Egypt and you are going to be my messenger. You're going to be the shaliach. You're going to perform the makot and you're going to perform tremendous miracles. You're going to take Am Yisrael through the sea and finally you're going to present them with the Torah on Har Sinai. For 40 days and 40 nights, Moshe Rabbeinu did not eat. He didn't drink. He didn't sleep. He stopped being human for all those days and all those nights just to be able to receive the luchot and bring them down to the Jewish people. In other words, those luchot were Moshe Rabbeinu's whole life. He put everything into those 2 stones. Those 2 stones represented everything that he invested in himself and in Am Yisrael. And he was over 80 years old at the time. But when he came back down from Har Sinai and he saw the Jewish people and what they were doing, in one instant he knew it's over. Game over. And instead of doing what most of us would have done, which is maybe to go home, put the luchot in a safe somewhere and say, we would have said, you know what? Let's wait a little bit. Let's give the nation a week or so, maybe 6 months. They need a little bit of time. Let's help them. Let's rehabilitate them. Let's change them. Let's talk to them. We got to talk to them. After all, they miscalculated. They didn't know I was coming back. They thought I was dead. Maybe they forgot. They didn't realize, miskanim, it's not fair. It's not their fault. Why are we blaming them? Most of us would have done that. Not Moshe Rabbeinu. No. Instead, crash, smash. He gave up all of it for the Torah's authenticity. And that's what made him great. It's not the ability to do, but also the ability to give it up, to make the necessary sacrifice when need be. You know, there's a story in the Gemara about a man named Shimon Ha'amsuni, alav shalom. He did something incredible. His life's work was to search throughout the entire Torah and find every single time that the word et, aleph taf, appears, and then discover something that we could learn from that et in the phrase. And there are thousands of ets, beginning with the first pasuk in Sefer Bereshit. Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. There's something to learn from every et in the Torah. And he taught us that the word et often comes to actually include something or add something. For example, kabed et avicha ve'et imecha. Why are those 2 ets included in this commandment of honoring your father and your mother? The pasuk could have just read kabed avicha ve'imecha. Why the extra et? Kabed et avicha ve'et imecha. Rabbi Shimon Ha'amsuni explains that the 2 ets are coming to include other people that you have to honor other than your parents, like your teachers, older people, elder siblings, your grandparents, and so on and so forth. So Shimon Ha'amsuni was writing books and books on every single et in the Torah and what that et is coming to include or to add. But then the Gemara tells us that when Shimon Ha'amsuni arrived at a particular et in the Torah, he said, oh, I'm out. I'm stumped. I give up. I'm done. Which et bewildered him? There is a pasuk in the Torah that states, Et Hashem Elokecha tir'ah. You should fear your God. Rabbi Shimon says, well, there's nothing that I could come to include from that et in that pasuk that concerns fearing God, because who else could we add that we could say you would fear the way you fear God? So he thought about it and he said, you know what, this whole project, I'm done, it's over. I can't seem to find an inclusion for this et over here. So one of his students came over to him and said, Rabbi, you spent your entire life on this project. You're just going to get rid of all the rest? What about everything else you did? And Rabbi Shimon said, Kishem shekibalti sachar al haderisha. Just like I'm going to be rewarded for all the work that I did until now. Kach kibalti sachar al perisha. So too, I'm going to be rewarded for having to leave this project, because I have to understand that the right thing to do at this very moment is to sacrifice the project. That's the right thing to do. Even though I invested so much time of my life in this, I have to find the strength at this very moment to sacrifice it. But then Rabbi Akiva alav shalom came along and provided a commentary on that difficult et in the Torah that Rabbi Shimon couldn't come up with. How did Rabbi Akiva interpret that et? He said, the et in the pasuk, et Hashem Elokecha tir'ah, is coming to also include the rabbis and Talmidei Chachamim. So even that et is a learning lesson. We have to fear our rabbis just as much as we fear heaven. So Rav Gifter alav shalom said on this matter, he says, I don't understand. Shimon HaAmsuni came up with a chidush for every single et in the Torah, and he couldn't come up with the chidush that Rabbi Akiva came up with. He couldn't think of the idea that that extra et in the pasuk is coming to include the rabbis and Talmidei Chachamim, that we should fear them. What did Rabbi Akiva see in this pasuk, or in general, that Rabbi Shimon did not see? And Rav Gifter answers beautifully. He said, you want to know what Rabbi Akiva saw? Rabbi Akiva saw Shimon HaAmsuni. What does that mean? He saw a man who could invest his entire life in something, and when it came time to sacrifice himself, he had the strength and the conviction to do so. Rabbi Akiva realized that if a man and a rabbi could be that great to make such a sacrifice, he could very well be feared as much as you fear God. Rabbi Akiva said, to see a man who has just a little bit of what Moshe Rabbeinu had, to invest so much and then to give it up, to sacrifice it, that's a man who has greatness. This is a man that one could fear. Now, what does all this mean, and what's the message for us here today? When I said that we don't appreciate Torah enough, it doesn't mean that we don't love Torah. We all say, I love Torah. But there aren't enough people willing to sacrifice something for it. Caring about Torah means being able to give up your time, sometimes even your money if need be. It means investing in it. We all love Torah, but we also have to demonstrate that we're willing to sacrifice something for the Torah. And you'll forgive me for this analogy, but there is a certain monkey out there that in order to capture that monkey, they create a certain trap that looks kind of like a jar. In that jar, they put some food that the monkey likes, some nuts or I don't know what. When the monkey sees the food, he's excited and he sticks his hand in the jar in order to retrieve what's in it. Once the monkey has the food in his fist, he can't get his hand out. He could put his hand into the jar, but when he makes a fist, he cannot take his hand out of the jar. And that's how they trap the monkey. He gets stuck there and then they come and they take him. Now, we should all have a question about that monkey, right? Question is, why doesn't he just open up his fist and let go and that's it? Gamarnu. You see you're trapped, so just open up your fist, let go and pull your hand out. Why doesn't the monkey let go? The answer is, he can't let go. Because once he has what he wants in his hand, he just can't give it up. He can't let go. That monkey is like many human beings who simply don't know when to let go, when to give up, when to make a sacrifice. Many of us love Torah, but we have conditions that we place on the study of Torah, on its observance. It has to suit our life, it has to suit our pocket, It has to be at the time that we feel is right for us. It has to be when we feel that we can. Loving Torah requires you to give something up for it. Moshe Rabbeinu's greatness and the greatness in Rabbi Shimon HaAmsuni was that they were able to say, I can give something up. I can make a sacrifice. I want to take the time now. You know that during the summer, I explained that during this entire summer period, we are now on a collecting campaign for our expansion of Ohel Sarah to the New Jersey area. I'm not going to take too much of your time about it. You know that we're in the process of purchasing a home in New Jersey, that half of that home is going to be converted in order to suit our needs. We are going to have shiurim there and Shabbatons there, Chagim, Rosh Chodesh functions, private shiurim, tutoring for kids. We're also going to have a music program for some kids there and some women there. And we need your help. Until now, we've been functioning from an apartment here in Brooklyn, and we're going to continue to have our shiurim and all our events here in Brooklyn. But as you know, if we're expanding in New Jersey and it's a house, there's a big difference between the expenses of an apartment and the expenses of a house. So I am asking you all to please reach out to us with whatever donations you can give to us towards this Bait project. You could log on to ohelsarah.com, www.ohelsarah.com, and click on the donate button, which will reroute you to a PayPal page where you could make your donation. You could call our offices at 718-500-4550 and make your donation via credit card, or ask for our address so that you can mail in a check if you wish. I'm urging every single woman out there to be part of this Torah project. Help me further Torah in the world. Help me further Torah in other parts of this country. Help me bring more light into this world. But Be'ezrat Hashem, I promise you that in the zchut of you opening up your hand and letting go, Be'ezrat Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will also open His hand and He will let go, and the berachot will flow into your life. Be'ezrat Hashem, please help us. I gave you all the information. You should have as a zchut before Shavuot, pick up the phone, call us and make a donation, or log on to ohelsarah.com, make the donation. Every penny counts. I appreciate it. That's all I'm going to say. Like I said, loving Torah means making a sacrifice. Now, that being said about sacrifices, I want to tell you the top 4 excuses that some men, and even some ladies, but I'm going to focus on the men since Chag HaShavuot, and they're the ones sitting and learning all night. Some men give excuses. These are the top 4 as to why they don't attend shiurim during the week the way they're obligated to do. And you should know about these excuses so that when you hear them, you will use your feminine wisdom in order to counteract them. Excuse number 1 is weddings. They cannot attend a shiur because they have a wedding that night. That goes to the ladies too. Here's what I don't understand about the weddings. Now, there are about 500 people, sometimes even more, who attend a wedding and they're invited to a wedding. Do you think anybody at that wedding would be upset if you arrived at 9 o'clock instead of at 8 o'clock? Ladies, this is a ridiculous excuse. Unless you're a brother, a sister, or a close relative or very good friend, there is no reason why you cannot attend a shiur and then go to the wedding. If a wedding is your excuse for not attending a shiur, you're never going to come to a shiur, because Baruch Hashem, Am Yisrael is filled with weddings every single month, and they should have many more, but it's not the best excuse in the world. Excuse number 2 for the men out there: leagues or sports activities. Some men belong to some kind of sports program where they play basketball or hockey or I don't know what, And you should know that it's very important for a man to be engaged in some kind of physical fitness. There's nothing wrong with a man or a young boy taking some time to play a basketball or bike or do something physically in order to stay in shape. But to tell your rabbi that your 2 hours of basketball or hockey every week is more important than your 2 hours of Torah, that's very sad. Again, if you're learning Torah every night or every morning and you missed one night of a shiur because of a basketball game, we can understand that, because at least you value Torah throughout the week. At least you have a healthy balance. There's absolutely nothing wrong with a young man taking some time out to play a basketball game to stay in shape. But it can't be that almost every night your excuse is, oh, I have a game tonight. To devote more time to playing sports than Torah, it's not an excuse. Unfortunately, I know of many young men who barely opened up a Gemara since the 12th grade because they're so obsessed with sports and other extracurricular activities. As mothers and as wives, you need to help the men in your life have a healthy spiritual balance. We are not goyim, we are Jews. And being Jewish means, and that's what you're celebrating on Chag HaShavuot, the acceptance of the Torah. Being Jewish means that the majority of our time is spent on spiritual pursuits, not the opposite. The spiritual pursuit is what will bring you beracha and hatzlacha. That's excuse number 2. Excuse number 3 is tiredness. That goes for women too. Many people claim they have a very long day and they're too tired to venture out to a shiur Torah. But if your excuse is tiredness, you'll never come to a shiur because we're tired every night. I would never give a shiur if I was tired because I'm tired every night like you are. We all have long days, but at least one of those days we should devote to Torah learning, no? That's excuse number 3. Excuse number 4 for the men out there is very important for you ladies to know. Number 4 excuse that men give to their local rabbis of why they can't attend the shiur is the wife. You know that excuse? Whenever you ask your husband to help you around the house, what does he tell you? He's always busy, he's tired, he's on the phone, he's taking care of business, emails, I don't know what. You're always complaining that your husband doesn't devote enough time to you around the house. But somehow when the rabbi asks your husband, tell me, why don't you come to a shiur tonight? He says to the rabbi, Rabbi, I would love to come, but my wife needs me at home, got a shalom bayit. Who do you think you're fooling? That's the best excuse you could come up with? My wife needs me. Your wife needs you? Where were you the entire week when your wife needed you? Pitom, the rabbi needs you. Oh, my wife needs me. When the rabbi needs you, your wife needs you. When your wife needs you, the rabbi needs you. Isn't that interesting? That's excuse number 4. The problem, though, is when you combine all 4 of these excuses, which many men and people have in their life. They're invited to weddings, but they have to attend. They're tired from a long day. They're involved in sports, and they're married. You know what that means? They have very little chance of seeing the walls of a Bet Midrash. Rav David Pravowski, Alav Shalom, was the late Rosh Yeshiva of the Meir Yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael. He had an unusual system. What was the system? He'd go to sleep at night, whatever that was, and his system was that the minute he woke up, he was up for the day. That meant that if he accidentally woke up at 2 in the morning, he was up for the day. If he woke up at 4 in the morning, that meant, he's up for the day. And he'd go to the Bet Midrash and learn. Now that's an insane system, because for a person to accidentally wake up at 3 in the morning and say, I'm not turning over, I'm not going back to sleep, I'm up. That's such a difficult thing to do. Obviously, Rav Pravowski was on a very high level. For him, it made sense. But when Rav Pravowski was in his 90s and he was not well. His family members told him the following. They said, Kvod Harav, please, when you go to sleep tonight, try to sleep through the night. If you happen to wake up in the middle of the night, don't bother looking at the clock. Just turn over and go back to sleep. You need your sleep. Sure enough, that night, he woke up at 4 in the morning and he resumed his usual system of waking up for the day, and he went to learn Torah. When his family found out about that, they went over to him. They said, Abba, what are you doing? This isn't good for you. And the Rav told them the following. My dear children, you should know that I'm not going to learn today for today. Because to tell you the truth, you're right. Today, I should probably sleep more. I need my sleep. But I'm coming to learn today for the sake of tomorrow. Because if I don't come to learn Torah today, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow and the next day after that. And that's what happened, ladies. He continued to wake up in the middle of the night and learned Torah for the sake of tomorrow. That's sacrificing for Torah. Now, I don't want you to think in any way that any of the 4 excuses that we mentioned don't have validity at times, because they most certainly do. The problem starts when we allow all the excuses to pile up. Excuse after excuse. It's a wedding, it's a basketball game, it's a vart, it's a Sheva Brachot, it's a Brit, it's Mother's Day, Father's Day, Memorial Day, Labor Day. Before you know it, you're in excuse land and you can't bring yourself to Torah land. Somehow those excuses pile up and there's less Torah in your life than there should be. So I want to tell you how much Rabbi Eliezer ben Holkenus gave up just to be able to learn Torah. He became one of the most diligent men of his time. The Gemara tells us that there wasn't anyone who arrived at the Bet Midrash as early as he came, and never did anyone leave later than him. Once he started learning, he basically never stopped. He became one of the greatest and most gifted Rabbanim of his time. But sadly, a tragic event occurred in his life. One day, there was a huge debate among the rabbis concerning an oven, and if that oven would be considered tameh or tahor, pure or impure. Rabbi Eliezer felt, based on some conditions and some premise, that the oven was tahor. The rest of the Rabbanim felt it was not tahor, it was tameh. During the debate, Rabbi Eliezer turns to the other rabbis and he says, if I'm right, the tree you see right here in front of us will move. Suddenly, the tree got up and moved. I don't know what that means, but that's what the Gemara says. Then Rabbi Eliezer said, if I am right, this brook, the running water, will demonstrate that I'm right. Suddenly, the waters began to flow backwards. Then Rabbi Eliezer said, if I'm right, the walls of this yeshiva will start to collapse. And the walls began to collapse. Then he said, if I'm right, let a heavenly voice, a bat kol, resound from Shamayim, proclaiming that I'm right. Sure enough, a bat kol was heard saying, why do you argue with Rabbi Eliezer? Don't you know he is always correct in matters of halakha? All the Rabbanim who saw these miracles before their very eyes stood up and said a famous statement. They said, Lo bashamayim hi. The Torah is no longer determined in the heavens. The Torah was given to us here on earth for us to interpret. And if a majority of Rabbanim disagree with Rabbi Eliezer, We don't care how the water flows, or that the tree moved, or that the walls collapsed. We don't even care about the heavenly voice that we just heard. The system here on earth is that the halakha is determined by the majority. The majority wins. Rabbi Eliezer, they turned to him and they said, the halakha is not going to be as you say. It's going to be according to the majority. And then the Rabbanim gathered together. They took all the items that Rabbi Eliezer deemed as tahor, and in front of everybody, they burned them in order to send a message that he was mistaken in his attitude. They then sat and decided they're going to put Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkenos in cherem. They were going to excommunicate him. They gathered to determine who's going to give him the news that he's excommunicated. And they concluded that it should be Rabbi Akiva who should deliver the news. Now I have to understand something. Rabbi Akiva was Rabbi Eliezer's student. You can imagine how hard it must have been for him. You could also imagine the levels of Kedusha and Torah of Rabbi Eliezer if he was Rabbi Akiva's teacher. So now Rabbi Akiva is sent with this difficult task. He came to Rabbi Eliezer's home. He sat in black clothing 4 amot away from him, far from him, and he said, my dear teacher, Rabbi Eliezer, I am afraid your friends are separating themselves from you. Rabbi Eliezer immediately understood what that was about. He sat on the floor, tore his clothing, and he began to cry hysterically. The Gemara tells us that on that day that Rabbi Eliezer was excommunicated, and he sat and he cried hysterically because of the pain that he felt, the entire world economy crashed. Why? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu was so upset at what was done to him. On that day, Rabban Gamliel, who was the Nasi of Am Yisrael, he was the leader who made the decision to excommunicate Rabbi Eliezer. He himself almost drowned in a shipwreck at sea. A big wave almost came and swallowed him up until he davened to Hashem. He had to raise his hands to Shamayim and he said, Ribono shel olam, Hashem, I'm not doing this for me. I am doing this for the honor of Torah. You gave the Torah for us here on earth to decide. I'm doing this for the honor of Torah. Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkenos, the great rabbi that we've been speaking about in this shiur, was excommunicated from the rabbinical council and the Jewish nation. He had to sit home alone because the rabbis felt that he wasn't being part of the regular system. And this was the only way to maintain Torah here on earth. So sad, it's so sad. Even if Rabbi Eliezer thought he was right, according to them, and he could provide a multitude of proofs that he's right, the rabbis felt that that's not the system that was designed here on earth. Therefore, they had to make the difficult decision of excommunication. Now, I want to explain something because I know you're all wondering, how was it possible for those rabbis to excommunicate such a great man like Rabbi Eliezer? You could cry for him, you could cry. And although this story needs an entire shiur, by the way, devoted to it, if not 2 or 3, I want to explain it to you very briefly and very simply on what I call pshat level, because obviously the story has very, very deep reasons, ramifications, and significance. At the simplest level, Chachamim tell us that the other rabbis felt that Rabbi Eliezer was acting in a manner similar to what's called a zaken mamre, which is a rebellious elder, so to speak. Very difficult inyanim here. You see, the Gemara in Sanhedrin explains that a member of the Sanhedrin is most certainly allowed and even encouraged to express an opposing opinion. You're allowed to say the opposite of what the Sanhedrin is saying. However, once the Sanhedrin votes, and that one rabbi's opinion is determined to be the minority opinion, he could still do one of the following. He could continue to follow his own minority opinion in his own home. He could even lecture to the public on the subject matter and give his opinion, but he must say, even though there are sources that prove that my position is correct, however, for a practical ruling, please consult the majority opinion, because the majority is what we go according to. However, that rabbi cannot give the public his ruling, which was the minority opinion, especially when he knows that the majority ruled against him. So Rabbi Eliezer wasn't excommunicated for saying, I think the oven is tahor. He's allowed to have an opposing opinion. He was excommunicated because he couldn't acknowledge that he was outvoted, and he would have insisted on continuing to tell everybody who asked him if the oven is tahor or tameh, that it is indeed tahor, even though he was opposed by the majority, and that you can't do. And in addition, this story took place during a tumultuous period in Jewish history with all sorts of splinter groups and a great deal of confusion after the second Bet HaMikdash was destroyed. So in order for our faith to remain cohesive, we picked the majority view in order not to create more factions among Bnei Israel. But here's the key of the story that I wanted to share with you. Rabbi Eliezer was married to Rabban Gamliel's sister, whose name was Ima Shalom. His wife was the sister of the man who excommunicated him. Rabban Gamliel was his brother-in-law. Now Rabbi Eliezer's wife knew that her husband's prayers were very powerful. So every day she would observe him to make sure he never puts his head down in prayer, because if he did, it would be very dangerous for the entire community, because he was wronged. One day, now we're not exactly sure what happened, but either a poor man came to the door, or his wife thought that it was Rosh Chodesh, so she went out to check. But either way, she was not watching her husband at that time. Sure enough, Rabbi Eliezer put his head down to pray. When his wife came back into that room and saw his head down, she said, I know already, I know. My brother Rabban Gamliel is dead. And within a few minutes, word got to her that Rabban Gamliel, her brother, the Nasi of Am Yisrael, the man who excommunicated her husband, had passed away. Everybody was shocked. All the neighbors wanted to know how she knew. And she said, I know that ever since the Bet HaMikdash was destroyed, every heavenly gate is locked. The only gate that's still open and accessible is the gate of wounded feelings, of pain. And Hashem hears the pain of his children down below. So I knew that if my husband was ever able to let out his pain, Borei Olam would hear it, respond to it, and my brother could never survive it. And indeed, her brother Rabban Gamliel, the Nasi of Am Yisrael, passed away that day. What do we learn from this story, ladies? It's a tragic story. It's so sad. Of course we learn about the power of our rabbis, the power of the Chachamim. Clearly, the Gemara's message also seems to be concerning the power of tsa'ar, of pain that a person feels. A person in pain arouses the mercy of heaven as well as judgment from the heavens, and that's a scary thing. But there's something else that we learn here. We see a great man who knew that by sticking to his convictions and to what he knew was right, he knew he'd be excommunicated from the entire klal, which meant he'd spent the rest of his days home alone praying because he wasn't allowed to join a minyan. Rabbi Eliezer was a man who believed in the authenticity of Torah to the extent that he'd sacrifice everything, and he did. That's the kind of strength we need to build up inside of us. It's the ability not only to love Torah or discuss what we just learned in a shi'ur, but also what we're willing to give up for the sake of Torah. What are you willing to sacrifice for Torah and to further develop Torah? I can't tell you how many hours of Torah learning have gone down the drain because of people who were busy with frivolous and materialistic matters of this world. How much Torah was missed as a result? If you spend 30 years of your life focusing on your job, sports, gashmiut, do you understand that you're investing all your years in something that doesn't earn you anything in this world or the next? Our mission in this world is to see to it that Torah is the main function of our home and that we truly invest in Torah. You know what we should pursue? We should run after sacrifices. Don't just run after what you're in the mood of. If you are willing to make sacrifices for Torah, you'll be able to see the beauty hidden in the Torah and the miracles that will come as a result of that. You know, the story that we read on Chag Shavuot is the story of Ruth HaMoaviyah. The story of Ruth shows us the difference between two people. Elimelech, Ruth's father-in-law, was a wealthy man who had everything. But when the famine struck the land of Israel, he deserted his brothers and sisters and he ran away to a foreign country because he wanted to hold on to his money and not share it with his people. He had, like that monkey, he had his fist closed tight in that jar, hoping to hold on to his wealth. And after running after all that materialism and all that wealth, the end result was devastation and tragedy. He himself dies. His two sons married Goyot, and eventually they too died. And what was left of his empire, of his financial wealth? You know what was left of it? Complete and utter poverty. Ruth was the total opposite. She came from tremendous wealth. Her father was a king. When her Jewish husband died, she chose to accompany her poor and destitute mother-in-law. She was now having to wear tattered clothing. She didn't have a cent to her name, and she returned to the Jewish nation, which was in itself in ruins. As far as Ruth knows, the nation is not going to accept her because she's a Moaviyah. So she's coming back with nothing to join the Jewish nation. She also knows that there's very little chance of her ever getting married. So her prestige was gone and the wealth was no more. And still, she gave all that up to live a life of Torah. And what was the end result? Real beauty. Ruth eventually became the great-grandmother of David HaMelech. But more than that, her sacrifice gave birth to the Mashiach. Ladies, accepting Torah doesn't mean attaining all the perks and the privileges that go along with it. It's also the idea that there will be many times where you have to make sacrifices. So when we celebrate Chag Shavuot, The question we should ask ourselves is, what am I giving up for the sake of Torah? Torah doesn't just come to a person. It's not just handed to you on a silver platter, and nor is it always so convenient. Torah requires sacrifice and the ability to give something up for its sake and for its survival. And nobody's asking you to give up your whole life over here, or your livelihood, your marriage, or your family. All Hashem is asking you to do in this generation is to give up a little bit of your time to learn His Torah so that you can cling to it the right way. I'm asking the women to go home and change the tone in your home concerning the importance of Torah. When your children see how much you're willing to sacrifice for the sake of Torah, you're creating a healthy spiritual path for them to walk on. So I want to conclude by telling you one more story. In the early 1900s, there was a young boy named Meir, who was a genius. In those days, the yeshiva system was different than it is today. Meir's father had to pay for a rabbi to teach his son Torah privately. And Meir was a very diligent student. At some point, the rabbi told his father, listen, your son Meir, he's too smart for me. I taught him everything that I can't teach him anymore. I think you should send him to study with the great Shanzarav. The Shanzarav had sons who were 18 and 19, so he took little Meir, who was around 10 at the time, and he let him learn with his older sons. Now, little Meir over here was a genius, but he was still a kid, so there were times that he would study, and there were times he would play, like all the other kids. While he'd play with the boys and girls in that family, he would tell those kids, he would say, I have a great idea. My idea is that one day, all the Jews around the world should learn the same page of Gemara. The other little kids, they poked fun at his idea. What are you, nuts? That'll never happen. Around the world, everybody should learn the same page of Gemara. But little Meir grew up, and in 1923, he became Rabbi Meir Shapiro. He merited to have an audience with the great Chafetz Chaim alav shalom, who when he heard his idea, loved his idea. And at the next gathering of world leaders that took place in Venice, Rabbi Meir Shapiro was given permission to explain his idea. And he did. That Rosh Hashanah in 1923, the Daf Hayomi program began. Years later, Rabbi Meir Shapiro was at a train station, and he met a man who was married to the daughter of the Shanzarav. When Rav Shapiro heard that, he asked if he could meet his wife. Now that was a strange request, because generally rabbis don't ask to speak with women. But a meeting was set up. When Rabbi Shapiro met with the Shanzarav's daughter, he said, do you remember when you were 7 and I was 10, we used to play together? Whenever we played together, I tell you about the idea that I had that one day Jews around the world would learn the same page of Gemara. Do you remember how you and your siblings made fun of me? Now, I'm not here to show off that I was right. I just came to tell you that since you're a mother and you're involved in educating many children, the next time a child comes to you with a dream that he has, please don't destroy it. Because if you would have shattered my dream, imagine what the Jewish people would look like today. Ladies, don't just go home and tell your children that Torah is nice, Torah is beautiful. Don't spend the next few days figuring out how many cheesecakes you're going to bake, because that's not the real preparation for Chag HaShavuot. It's nice, of course, you're a woman, but it's not what makes you, you. What makes you, you, is coming home and educating your family and being a positive role model, besides your duties in the kitchen and around the house. It's giving your household the ability to understand that Torah isn't just about the beautiful gatherings and the holidays and the food, but also the sacrifices. Teach your children about Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus and what he sacrificed. Talk to them about Rabbi Shimon HaAmsuni and what life project he had to give up for the sake of the Torah. Teach them about Moshe Rabbeinu, who shattered the luchot, because at that moment, that was the sacrifice that was demanded of him. We also have the strength and the power in our home to make sacrifices for the sake of Torah. The beauty of Torah is the bracha and the nes that will flow into your life because of all the sacrifices that you're making and will continue to make. A Torah that was earned with sacrifices is a Torah that will one day praise you. I want to wish you all Chag Sameach, and may we continue to fill our lives with what's truly important. Torah, Torah, Torah. Amen. Ken, Yehi Ratzon.